and welcome to the Powerful Personal Brand Podcast, where my guests and I share tips and tricks to help inspire you to build a great personal brand to increase your visibility and authority. I am your host, Claire Bahn, and on today's episode, I am very excited to be joined by Sam Kabert. Sam is a successful serial entrepreneur turned spiritual seeker. Despite all of Sam's ventures and business success and being recognized as one of Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 just at the age of 31, he soon recognized that something was missing. Sam realized that despite his success, he was unhappy. The understanding catapulted him to his most recent exploration of his life's purpose. And his mission is to bridge the gap between the way we conduct ourselves in business, mindful practices, and how we communicate with everyone, especially oneself, all through prioritizing psychological safety and mental health first. Thank you so much for being here, Sam. And your dog says hi too.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect timing. Thank you so much for having me, Claire. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Yeah. So was there like a turning point? Was there something that like really kind of happened? What happened that was like, I have to change what I'm doing? Or this, what was that thing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there oftentimes is that one thing. And for me, it was really a culmination of those things. It was chasing success. And at the time, I didn't realize that I was on a hamster wheel that was just really chasing that fleeting moment, that feeling of the dopamine that gets released when you achieve goals. And I was a goal setting junkie so much that I wrote my second book called The Written Goal. It was about setting goals, right? So I ended up writing 3 books in a year. I had multiple podcasts, was on multiple nonprofits, all these different things, built a $1 million company while working less than 4 hours a day, had work-life balance. I had everything. And I just felt empty within. So what did I do? I was seeking external validation, but I didn't really understand it at that time. And the thing for me that really brought everything to the forefront was a relationship I was in, which isn't far from the case, right? Many people experience that. And it was a toxic relationship off and on, one of those. And that final time we were off, it was kind of like starting to sit in that discomfort. And I knew it wasn't so much the relationship. There was something more. And I could go into the whole story here, but that's really the thing that kind of sent me into that numbing depression. And from there, I just started the act of surrender and being able to tap into my intuition. A plant medicine known as ayahuasca found me. I sat with this plant medicine for ceremonial healing. And after that, just like the epitome of a spiritual awakening experience. And I was like, show me everything. I just did a deep dive of spirituality and I've been on the path ever since.
That's amazing. You kind of mentioned work-life balance, but I know that one of your kind of things that you talk about is feeding your soul and the relationship between life and work. So what is your feeling about, work-life balance? I'd love to learn your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ever since high school, I remember hearing about work-life balance and I just thinking to myself, I want that, I want to be able to live my life. I don't want a desk job, right? So I ended up becoming an entrepreneur while I was still in college. And here I am 11 years later operating the same business. It's been rebranded to Swagworks. And like I mentioned, I had work-life balance. I read Tim Ferriss's book, Think and Grow Rich, back in 2013. And I never got to the 4-hour work week, but I got to the 4-hour work day, right? And in truth, I was really working like 2 or 3 hours a day, not that hard, and doing the things that I wanted to do, living in Campbell. You're very familiar with that town. I believe that's where you grew up. And I lived in Silicon Valley, in this town, Campbell, pretty much in the heart of Silicon Valley, and really the peak of my career, I would say. And I had all this freedom to do the things I wanted to do. And I achieved work-life balance, but it wasn't enough, right? So after sitting with the medicine ayahuasca that I mentioned previously, this whole concept of spirituality and connecting with my soul, that was something that I was missing. And what came through was the message of soul life balance, which is a reframe of work-life balance, where we realize that we're going to put ourselves first and foremost, always, while simultaneously reframing work as part of the human experience. Now, taking it a step further, we can look at the archetypal energies of yin and yang, or yang. And many people these days are talking about the archetypal energies of the feminine and the masculine. And not to get too deep in that, but if you're not familiar with these terms, when I say archetypal energies of feminine and masculine, I'm not talking about like genitalia. What I'm talking about is we all have these different archetypes within us. And it's so much easier to understand yin and yang because many of us have seen the yin and yang and we understand the opposing sides, right? So to break that down, the yang or yang is about doing. It's about structure, obligations, and how we show up in the world. We can think about as our responsibilities. Whereas the yin is about softening. It's about receptivity. It's about being connected with your intuition and really your soul. So if we look at work-life balance, we can so clearly see that work is equated to the yang energy, right? We have projects, we have tasks, we have deadlines, we have meetings, all these type of things that require how we show up in the world. And in our life, it's no different because most of our waking hours are spent working. And when we're not working, we have to maybe pay the bills, maybe take care of our pets or our kids. And hopefully we're doing something for ourselves, like going to the gym, but still most of these things are about structure. So if we look at work-life balance, we can so simply see that we're being misguided here to be out of balance in that archetypal energy of yang or masculine, which is really the human doing, which we all know we're human beings. So what's the answer? That's where I believe to bring in more yin or archetypal energy of the feminine and reconnect with our souls. So that is what soul life balance is about. And really the easiest way to implement soul life balance is really thinking about, what do I need today? Yes, I could say, how can I feed my soul today? But sometimes, the language might not really resonate. So it could be as simple as, what do I need today? What's going to make me feel fulfilled, joyful, whatever it is? Because oftentimes we forget about ourselves. So at the core of this message, it's really about connection with oneself and really checking in versus getting lost in the to-dos and just the chaos of most of us experiencing the chaos of Western society.
That is a very interesting way of looking at it. I hadn't really thought about how kind of work-life balance kind of meant that masculine energy in a lot of ways versus the feminine energy. And I think it is interesting. I feel like I've had moments in my life where I'm like, I need to prioritize myself. I need to do these things for myself. Even my husband pushes me. He's like, you just work all the time. So I completely get it. And yeah, I haven't really thought about what fed my soul, but yeah, it is so important to really find those things and take care of yourself. I mean, I don't know if you know anything about I think when you feed your soul, it does reduce your stress level, right? I mean, your stress level goes down, everything, cortisol, all that, you're just healthier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a ton of different practices that I teach when I speak to at conferences and different groups or lead workshops, but whether it's meditation, grounding, yoga, breath work, journaling, any of these things. And one of the more simple practices to release stress is actually connecting with people in their eyes. And I mean, not like looking at their chin or their forehead or their nose, but really looking into someone's eyes. And what happens is it releases oxytocin within the body. And what that does is it helps you to feel more connected with others as well as reduce stress. And I mean, right now, we all know that because of 2020 and everything else, right? There's more mental health crisis than ever before. In fact, 2 months ago, there's a new hotline that was made. The number's 988. If you dial or text these numbers, it will redirect you to a suicide hotline. So if that doesn't show the mental health crisis we're facing now, then the other stat I'll throw out is that online research to improve one's own mental health and well-being has gone up by 500% in the past few years. So we can really start to see how important it is to find these ways to connect with oneself. I absolutely agree with what you're saying, and it does reduce stress and everything else.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously I do personal branding and marketing and all that kind of stuff. And it seems like, oh, it's so much fun, but it can do a doozy on your mental health. If you really think about, I know for me in 2020, I had to do a detox from social media because I just couldn't stand this, the world had craziness in it. And there was a lot of craziness on social media. There was also this kind of like, just this fakeness about it. Everything is perfect. Everything is wonderful. And you're like, it's not wonderful. How are you with your personal brand? Are you on social media a lot? Do you do it to a point? How do you feel about that?
I just lead by my truth, like there's so many different narratives to go out there, and there's many different paths to success as it relates to social media or personal brand or whatever else. And I've tried all the different things, right? Like I really got into personal branding through content creation back in 2016. And that's when I started blogging weekly, and I'm in the promotional products industry, right? So swag industry. And I would blog weekly about different things about swag for sure. And at a conference a few years before that, maybe 2012 or something, I was at the National Office Supply Convention because my parents have an office supply business. And at the time I was doing some sales for them in conjunction with my swag business because they're kind of complementary. And I went to this conference and I was networking with other peers, and it was like a young professionals group within the office supply industry. And they were talking about all kinds of different things, right? Like some of them were really niche into furniture. Other ones were doing like print technology and all this different stuff. Other people are Jansan, like janitorial supplies. And other people were like daily office supplies that you would sell and buy, right? And my thing was swag, was promotional products. So I couldn't really relate to them. And I was telling them about swag, and they're picking my brain on that. And one of this girl jokingly called me Swag Sam. So I would joke with my friends at that time that, I was Swag Sam. And that was like 2012, 2013. I launched my business in 2011. So it was pretty early on. And then when I got into content creation in 2016, I started to like intentionally build out this Swag Sam brand. 2017, January 17th, 2017, launched the first podcast and turned into a media network. And from that media network, we had 5 different podcasts on the show or on the network. I ran one with a co-host, the original, and then I also had Mojo Mondays with Swag Sam. From there, I wrote the 3 books in less than a year. The series were called Success with Swagger, all by Swag Sam. So I had, a podcast, I had this, I had that. And then, I still have, we don't do it as much, but a food show on YouTube called Eat Up California now. It used to be Eat Up Silicon Valley. I had a swag unboxing show with Swag Sam. So I did all these different things to build up the Swag Sam brand. I also love kombucha. I've been drinking kombucha since like 2013, I believe. So like before it really got trendy and popular. And I love kombucha so much that around 2017 or 18, I bought a kegerator, not for beer, but for kombucha. So I would brew my own kombucha or sometimes buy it, right, from wholesale, put it on the kegerator. And then since I sell swag, I would get these bottles. I forget what they're called, but they have the seal on top, and I would fill them up with kombucha from not the one I made, but from GT's if I bought it wholesale. And I printed the bottles with the Swag Sam logo, and I forget what else it said, but instead of nutritional facts on the back, it had swag facts. So it looked like a nutritional label. So it was like a cool little fun thing to do for the Swag Sam brand. And I mean, this all culminated in being named Silicon Valley's 40 Under 40 list in 2019. And from there being named as a rising star within the swag industry in 2020. Now, I did ayahuasca. But
it sounded like there's just, so you were doing too much. I mean, I'm exhausted by you hearing this.
It was so much. It was confusing.
And it can, that I feel, yeah, I think, I mean, God, you're just like this and that and that. I feel like you were chasing, just like you were saying, it sounds like you were chasing instead of kind of a focused approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I was absolutely chasing success, and I'm not alone in that. That's the thing. So many of us, whatever it is, feel like we have a chip on our shoulder, and whether it's we need to prove it to ourselves or prove it to someone else. So that was very long-winded. But to answer your question, since going down the spiritual path intentionally as of 2019, I haven't been so concerned about a personal brand. You know, I've slowly phased out the Swag Sam brand. It's not in alignment with who I am and what I'm about now. Right now, my biggest message is soul life balance. And it's a message that's bigger than myself. It's not about me, right? Think about Simon Sinek. Yes, we equate Simon Sinek with start with why or knowing your why and things like that, but it's bigger than him. It's not about Simon Sinek. So for me, like, all I really care about is that people resonate and hear the meaning behind soul life balance. Yeah, of course, selfishly, ego and business wise and all that kind of good stuff, I would like them equate it with me. But where this is coming from is from my heart, because, you know, I have so much uncertainty. I have so much depression around the world that we live, like in the way the world operates. And I do believe that if we were to shift at something as simple as work-life balance to soul-life balance, it would make a major impact within the business world. So yeah, for me, it's not about like my personal brand anymore. It's really about that message. And it doesn't need to be equated with me. It's bigger than me, you know?
But I actually want to say that that is your personal brand, because that is actually how I believe that your personal brand should be. I always talk about, done podcasts on this, where I say that to be really good, you need to lead with altruism. If you're not giving and you're not authentic and you're not true, it doesn't really matter what you're doing, right? I talk about personal branding and things like that, but I talk about I'm giving information and I want to help people. That is what I enjoy doing. And I also enjoy bringing stuff like this to the, attention of other people, because a lot of us don't think about how things are affecting us and whether we're taking care of ourselves and all these little things that we can do to, like you say, feed our soul. But I do think that is your personal brand. I think they are one and the same, because if you are not true and authentic and it sounds like you lead with altruism. I actually say, it's interesting. My co-founder, whenever he does now in all of his kind of sales calls, they're not sales calls. Like, we're also vetting them. Do I want to work with you? Do I believe that you are true and authentic and that I can get behind you? Because if I don't like you, I don't want to sell you. I don't want to work in. So that is actually one of the key things that I think really goes into a really great personal brand. Like you mentioned Simon Sinek, and people trust him. They know his messaging. They believe that he is trying to help. He does sell books. He does sell speaking engagements. But if you don't have that trust, if you don't have someone going like, yeah, I really love what Sam is about. I believe that he's truthful. I believe that it's not, you're not faking it. That is your personal brand. That is what I believe.
Yeah, I love that. And I would defer to you because you're the personal brand expert. I would never claim to be. So I would definitely defer to you. And
I think that if that is what you are doing, that is great. I think that is what's going to build your personal brand. So I think it's great, because when you were telling me how you were doing it originally, it was like doing all these things and I have to, oh my God, it was almost like going like squirrel, shiny object. You weren't able to like focus. You're like, no. So it sounds like you've finally done that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think, because I'm really tapped into my intuition now, and I hear you and I see that, but all of that was the training ground, right? Like all of that needed to happen that way for everything to unfold the way it did and for it to land the way it is now,
Mm-hmm. I think that's for everybody has a different path, sometimes for some it's rockier than others. Everyone's on their own path. And I think that everyone that has to go through their own kind of difficulties and that kind of thing. And that is definitely one of the things that I've learned, especially by having this podcast, is that so many people bring just another layer of something that I find that is just interesting, whether it can help you kind of in your daily life, in your business life. And I think this is something that can just really, if someone's struggling with, I don't feel like there is something missing. There is too much. I'm doing too much. And that, you can actually get help, which I think is absolutely amazing. Are there any tips that you would give? What are tips that you would do to give people that are like, in a business world? Are there any tips that you can give for like communication or dealing with like trouble at work or trouble with employees or their boss or anything like that?
Yeah, mindful leadership is so important. And one of the easiest ways to implement becoming a mindful leader and bridging the gap between mindfulness and workplace culture is conducting a W.D.I.F.L.E. And a W.D.I.F.L.E. is an acronym that stands for what I feel like expressing. So basically, this is something you could use before starting a meeting. And it kind of depends if you have like 2 people, 5 people, 10 or 20, whatever the number of people you have in the meeting, how you're going to conduct it. But what's most important is to know and understand what a safe place and a safe container is. And from there, introduce it as a safe container and explain with what I feel like expressing, that the idea is to take whatever's on your mind. If you're not feeling fully present, if something happened earlier in the day that is still on your mind, or if there's a future pacing going on of something that's going on later that you're stressing about, express it. You have an opportunity to actually express how you're feeling, to clear it out, because when we speak it, it clears it from the mind, and it also gives others permission to be vulnerable as well. And this is something that is a simple share. It's, 30, 60 seconds. It's not multiple minutes. It's not unpacking the layers. It's very lightweight. And as a leader, we're also going to introduce it as we're not going to include reflections or clarifying statements. I lead men's groups and explain this a lot more and things like that. And I do workshops with businesses to unpack all of this. But the basic premise is you're setting the container for a safe space for someone to share. And you're not asking anyone to share. You're inviting them to share, especially if you have, like, say, 10 or more people in the meeting, because before you know it, you're just going to go around sharing and you won't have your meeting, which I don't think that would be productive from a business point of view. And this is what soul life balance is about. It's about the balance, right? We don't want to be out of balance, to just go straight in like robots and be like, okay, here we are, but not seeing each other, right? This is how we improve psychological safety. And the other thing that's really simple as a leader is just making eye contact with your employees or your coworkers, right? And this is what I talked about earlier, where this helps to feel more connected with one another, because most of the time we just have our head down in the office, right? And we're just trying to do our job well. And 86% of employees feel that they need to prove to their bosses that they deserve to keep their job. So we need to find ways to increase the mental well-being, because most people don't feel safe in the workplace.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I have one employee, and she rarely comes onto Zoom with on camera, and it's a big, I'm like, really bothers me. So I had a little chat with her, and I found out it was because she smokes, and she didn't want to show that. I go, my sister-in-law smokes like a chimney. I don't care. Like, it's a kind of a, makes it California to me. I just I really, so many things are just like, I could really care less. Like, it's really not impacting me. If that helps you be creative, let's go. Not going to really pass judgment on that. And so I think that was like one of the biggest things that kind of let her be free and be like, okay, you don't mind seeing me in this way and kind of being vulnerable. But I'm like, no, I don't care, because I wanted to see her, because that to me was more important than anything else. Because I do think, we're all virtual, and I think it's so hard. And the only way you can see people is through these mediums like this.
Yeah, Zoom's been an amazing way to, or whatever you use, Google Meet, however you lead your meetings, but it's been an amazing way to increase work-life balance or soul-life balance, however you want to say it, right? Because at the end of the day, it does allow us more flexibility to live our lives and not spend the majority of our lives working. Yeah,
I completely agree. I mean, I've been working for myself for over 10 years, and working out of my home and trying to figure out how that works, right? And how to have your own space and things like that. So the fact that everyone's doing it, I'm like, yeah, it's great. It's good and it's bad, because you have distractions like Riley, but they're great too, right? Because you can, because I actually look at it, and if you were at work, think all the time that you weren't with Riley, and you'd have to get a dog walker, you'd have to do all these things. And I've got dogs too, kids, like all these, if you're actually with them, that helps feed your soul as well.
Exactly. Like feeding your soul is just the easy things. A lot of times when we hear about spirituality, the word soul, mindfulness, any of this stuff, we go straight to like meditation or journaling or yoga or breath work. But it's as simple as just finding the little things, right? That's why I invite people to reframe the question to what brings me joy, because it's a lot easier to answer that question sometimes.
I'll tell you a quick story. So sometimes in the morning, I'm like, and Nicole, who's the producer on this, could tell you, sometimes I get in here, my hair is wet. I'm just like, because I got to put makeup on and do all these things. And my morning, there's like, so I get up in the morning, I walk the dogs, and my husband and I have coffee on the back patio when the weather is good. Otherwise, we do it in our bedroom. We have a nice little window that we can sit in. And that is something we started probably a year and a half ago. And it means so much to both of us. Just like we kind of like, we look at news. I'll get on Instagram and see stupid stuff or TikTok, but it's just something that's kind of silly, but we're just there together and the dogs hang out with us. And it's just kind of this nice little morning ritual with a really good taste, yummy coffee. And we decided to kind of flip. Okay, let's change it a little bit. Let's try to, speed things up because I'm always late and all this kind of stuff. And that day was a horrible day. And I started to realize that little 45 minutes or whatever it is in the morning, that fed my soul, it fed my husband's soul. And if we didn't do it, we were completely off for the rest of the day. So you're like, I got to figure out something else because that is important.
That's it.
Is that kind of like feed your soul? Is that how you would? Yeah.
That's it. It's these little things. And then I would encourage people to add on more, as opposed to when most people get down this path, they'll want to do all the things and just layer it all on. And you and I know, because we're both entrepreneurs, right? And very much entrenched in the business world, maybe a bit of workaholism for you. I don't know, a lot of workaholism for me, as they say that your mess is your message. So go figure. I'm talking about like working less, right? And living more.
Yeah.
But, I would say that most people approach mindfulness as a to-do list, like, oh, did I do this? And that's counterintuitive because it's really tapping into what do I need now? So instead of having an agenda of like, oh, okay, let me do this, it's just coming back to yourself and being present in the moment and asking yourself, what do I need in this moment? And I teach yoga classes. I taught this morning on the beach. I subbed for a friend last minute, so it kind of changed my morning routine and it was great. But every time I lead a yoga class, and I teach them usually once a week, sometimes a few times more, but every time I lead a class, I invite them to like, whatever intention you came for this practice, that's great, but what is your intention right now? And I bring them back to that throughout the practice because most of the time we get so tunnel vision, right? And now I'm talking about myself mostly, right? Because I know it's from experience with goal setting. You have that laser focus and it's like, okay, well, we need to be adaptable. And that's where we bring the soul back in, just being present with what's going on within.
It was actually interesting because I've always lived in big cities. So you have to be mindful of your surroundings to stay safe as a female. So that I always do that. But also I found that when you were just present, you didn't have your headphones on, you weren't focused on this. There's just too much too much other stuff going on. But when you were just present, birds chirping, like just things like that, you just notice things that you never would have noticed. And, when I walk my dog, I never have headphones on, and I see people walking their dog and they have headphoons on and I go, poor dog. They don't feel loved. Your dog, you're with your dog, love your dog, experience it with your dog. And it's so many things that you just like, for instance, one of my coffee mornings with my husband and I, a hummingbird came over. We had a hummingbird that kept coming by my husband's head and he would come by and he'd kind of sit there. We're just like, oh my God, he like loves you. So then I Googled it. No, he didn't love us. He just wanted us to give him some food. So we put a hummingbird feeder in there. And did you know that they're like really brutal with each other? That is a thing we did not know. They are very mean. But it's this kind of stuff where it's just so little of like, like the hummingbirds, go out there, see what they're doing. I don't know. I just think there are these little things that people don't do. They may seem silly, but I don't meditate per se, because I find I'm just like, I'm too much going on. But if you just are mindful, I feel like it connects with my soul. Just being there to just seeing stuff, birds. It may sound cheesy, but people don't see stuff.
I totally agree. Reconnecting with nature, right? Because we're all just one. And it's one symphony. And when we're slowing down and connecting with that and looking at the hummingbird coming up, and I do it too. I'll Google like spiritual meaning of seeing a hummingbird and it not leaving me alone or whatever, and checking it out. But what I really tried to do, and I'm not the best at, and I also encourage other people to do, because I know it is a challenge, but to sit with how it makes you feel when that hummingbird comes, rather than searching Google for spiritual meaning or seeing on Google like, oh, that hummingbird was just hungry and just want to feed you. It was like, what came up for you? And it's all these practices that you're talking about to slow down, go within, and really questioning and getting to know our inner landscape.
Right. Well, we did sit with it for a while. We were very happy, but then it kept coming up, and we're just like, what if he doesn't just love us? What if he really wants something? That's when it came up. I'm like,
well, that's spiritually bypassing. So just for some of your listeners that may be like nodding their heads and really into all this type of stuff, they might be familiar with spiritual bypassing. And what that is using your belief system as a way to justify a certain way of being, right? And a lot of times people that go too far on the spiritual side start to be like, oh, well, this was for sure that because it was a sign, and whatever, they get lost in that. And I can get lost in that as well. And that's where this is a balance, right? Because you could be either too far on one side or the other. So just bring yourself back to center, realizing that it takes both the 3D physical form and the unseen world.
Yeah. Because for the longest time, my husband's like, he likes me, he's my friend. And I'm like, but what if he doesn't? He's going to start pecking your head. Be like, if you go too far to the other side, he's like, no, it's not about you, man. I need the food.
That's fine.
I like the balance. That's good. This has been a really fun conversation. So what if someone needs to find that balance in their life? They're like, okay, I've listened to this. I want some tips on how I can find a little bit more balance. Could you have 3 tips that you can give to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, like I've been saying, I would say just ask yourself, sit with it. There's a really special moment when we wake up, and most of us waste that moment to just grab our phone, get lost in technology. But if you can pause when you wake up and try, if you can, wake up without an alarm. And if you do enough, your body will start to wake up on the right time. I mean, it's nuts. I don't use an alarm anymore. And even when I need to wake up like extra early, maybe I'll use an alarm depending on what that thing is. But for the most part, my body ends up knowing when to wake up. So I'm able to sit there and not grab a phone or what old school alarm, whatever you use, and just sit there. And that's a perfect time to just connect with how your sleep was the night before, how you feel in that moment. Think about what you need in that moment and what you need throughout the day. So pausing when you wake up would be one tip for sure. A second tip would be to connect with your breath. And a very, very, very simple way to connect with your breath is through box breathing. And box breathing, you'd start with an exhale, then you'd inhale from the bottom of the belly and bring that breath all the way up to the chest. Hold it for about 4 seconds, release through the mouth, let it be a slow exhale for 4 seconds, hold the breath at the bottom. Once again, inhale for 4 seconds, hold at the top. So it's doing a repeating of those. And I mean, I lead that in my yoga classes. I lead it in my keynote talks, my breakout talks, workshops. And it's amazing how just a couple minutes of connecting with your breath changes your physiological state. And the final piece I would say is go to samkabert.com/practice. And right there, I have a free guide for you guys that's going to give you 3 undeniably simple tools and tactics to practice soul life balance daily. But again, everything I said, like, you're your own best guide. And we tend to seek external resources. And what this is all about is just going back within to realizing that we know what's best with us and we have innate wisdom of our own heart. And it's just about softening and making the time to feel the internal world.
I feel like a lot of times, sometimes, whether it's parents or whatever, people are kind of taught not to doubt their intuition. They're like, I had a conversation with somebody and they're like, I don't know if it's me that wants to do it or if it's like all these people that are yelling at me to do it that makes me want to do it. So I feel like there is something about kind of just being able to trust yourself that a lot of people don't. haven't been able to do. So I think that's a very important message.
Amazing. Glad
That's
it resonates.
great. So yeah, no, I love it. So Sam, this was a great conversation. I feel like there's so much to just really to feed your soul. Let's just say that. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for listening and watching. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye.